Welcome to On the Table with Ashley. This is episode 5 of our wellness series, where we take a deep dive into the true meaning of wellness, cutting through the noise of quick fixes and fleeting health trends to uncover what wellness truly looks like. Each episode, you'll hear from experts across different fields as they share how they approach health, from physical and mental health to holistic and alternative practices, to give you real lasting ways to care for your mind, body, and spirit. Today, our guest is Linsly Donnelly. Linsly is a mindset and longevity coach, board executive, media and technology consultant, and a motivational speaker. As a strategy consultant turned entrepreneur and citizen scientist, she became inspired to partner with Midlife Women with a simple goal: help midlife women build and sustain their energy in order to craft their next decades to be ones full of purpose and joy on their own terms. Linsly offers different types of wellness classes, as well as personalized coaching to women searching for solutions or next steps in their midlives. Carrying multiple coaching certifications, such as Designing Your Life, Positive Neuroplasticity, and TQ Transition Coaching, or MEA, to name a few, Linsly has helped hundreds of women define the next chapter of their lives. Enjoy.
Linsly Donnelly, thank you so much for joining me. It's so fun to have a friend in the studio.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
And I have been wanting to have this conversation for a long time, and it's a perfect time because we're doing this series on wellness. And I feel like your definition of wellness, and we're going to get into the weeds of this, is very in line with what I'm finding in sort of my journey.
Oh, good.
So I always like to start my conversations hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were.
So my family moved every year as a kid until I was in high school. My dad was a bankruptcy turnaround guy. So that kind of impacted the kind of child I was. I was, on the one hand, really comfortable being by myself, because I was the new kid every single year. And on the other hand, I'm kind of a trained extrovert. I think naturally I'd be much more introverted if I hadn't moved every year. That was a gift that I got out of that process, is getting out there. So, I was just kind of a kid who could be reflective and journal and then jump right in and start shaking hands.
Do you have friends from childhood that you picked up along the way, or was it sort of always a new batch of friends?
It was always a new batch of friends. I have one friend who I kind of kept in touch with through the way, but it was a different time. We were pen pals, so we didn't have Instagram and things to follow each other. And then my friend from high school, my dear friend from high school, I'm still in touch with. But most of my friends, and I love my different tribes of friends, are from adulthood. They came from LA days, or they came from one of my very first jobs out of graduate school, or they're my college friends. So it's more from 18 onward.
That's so interesting. And do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother.
Okay.
7 years younger.
7
years younger.
That's a
Yeah.
lot.
So, I left to go to college when he was like 10, and he really remembers there being a distinct period in time. But now he's one of my favorite people to be with. He's a great sense of humor, and he's also a big wellness guy, which is kind of funny that we both ended up with this as our second passion in life, because it wasn't part of our growing up messaging, really.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's talk about that a little bit. So I went through a period where I was listening to Tim Ferriss a lot.
Yes.
And the whole quantified
Me too,
self.
yes.
And I feel like you're the female version of that. But you had an entire career before that. So just tell us how the before,
Yes.
a little like snapshot of the before, and then we'll jump into now.
Awesome. Well, so my life in the before phase was pretty much consumer marketing, strategy consulting, and then tech and media startups. So that was the business arena. And I was motivated that way because I had watched a lot of the moving with my family. There would be financial ups and downs. So I was motivated to be able to understand my financial dynamics right out of the gate. And that drove a lot of my career choices. And the tech and media stuff was a ton of fun, startups in great spaces, but they all had a commonality that they were data driven. Like even before we were in the internet world, one of my very first jobs out of college was the local media manager for the Dr. Pepper 7-Up brands, which meant I had to decide by zip code how much money to give the bottler network based on a CPM value, based on a demographic. So I was always collecting data. And that was what I took forward into every one of those other jobs. So I went on to be like, started a company that we sold to Joanne Fabrics and Crafts that was a data-driven arts and crafts business. And then wine.com was all about, what kind of wine consumer could we figure out you were quickly coming in through the portal. I am a big believer in data-driven decisions. And when I got into this health and wellness question, it was going to be the same. It was like, I'm going to read a bunch, I'm going to have a hypothesis, and then I'm going to test it. N equals 1 on me. And sometimes the tests, are relevant to everybody else, and sometimes they're not, because
Right.
everybody isn't an equals one.
Well, that's actually, I think, one of the things that I've found. And I want to hear about how this journey in wellness started for you. For me, I feel like, and I think you're probably the same, like I've always cared about health and wellness
Yes,
and exercise, but going through menopause was like a big shift. Just things that used to work stopped working.
Yes.
And it was sort of like I need to refigure it out.
Definitely.
And I think for me, the main learning, and one of the reasons I really wanted to do this series, is that it's so easy. You see out there like quick fixes, whether it's on Instagram or in news stories or trends. And what I found is like, that's actually really not true. Like what works for me may or may not work for you, which on the one hand is not great because it's more work. But on the other hand, I think is reassuring because you try the quick fix and it doesn't work and you get sort of upset.
Yeah,
or,
disappointed.
What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
So I think there's like, it's a double-edged sword.
Yes.
But tell us, how did the wellness journey start for you? Because you've been on this journey for some time.
Yes. So, I've always been kind of cognizant of health and fitness from probably high school on. And then I've had periods in my life where I just neglected it. And it was sort of a wake-up call, like in the startup days where all of a sudden I was, 12 months in and I hadn't gone on a run in 12 months. And it was like, oh, I am in the worst shape ever. I can't keep going. I'm sleeping 3 hours a night. This is not sustainable. And so that was a whole reset. And I got into weightlifting kind of in my 30s because of that call to action. And then we have kids, right? That's another big time where your body's like, hey, guess what? It's not going to work the way it used to. Another big call to action. And then menopause. So for me, menopause hit me during COVID. And it was like, oh, I don't even know what's going on. Like, is it me? Is it COVID or what's happening? So, it was 2020. I loved all the science and the conversation about menopause now. It wasn't going on in 2020, like zero. It was like a word you didn't even say at a dinner party. Like, it's so great how different that is now. That it's the science of women's physiology has gotten a spotlight, all of it. But when it started, I was like, I'm going to have to go learn about all this. And I just started reading everything I could get my hands on. And in combination, I was interested in the science of positive mindset. Kind of some family dynamics had happened in our own home, but also with my parents' generation, where I was watching their psychology just erode. I was like, what, is it like a bicep? Can we build it back? What is that? So I got super deep in trying to understand mindset. And the thing that you come across in anything you read about mindset is the number one thing you can do is move. Like exercise goes with mindset, levers of life, like have a great mindset and work it like a bicep and take care of the body that's going to carry that mindset is what got me into this whole wellness discovery journey. And then in parallel, my mom started to hit all the stuff that we were living with. And she started to hit that maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And she was always just a naturally thin human. So she really didn't hear about exercise for anything other than weight loss. So she kind of got in her 70s and it was very difficult. And she's now in a situation that is not recoverable. And so that goes into your head as well. You're like, hey, I don't want to end up there. So all of those factors kind of just spit out, let's get smart about our longevity wellness curve.
Yeah. So tell us then where it started and then how it's evolved. Because now I know you do speaking engagements, you do coaching, you do one-on-one and group. So there's a lot of things that you have on offer. But I think you spent many years just researching and learning. And so just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So the good news about living in Park City during COVID is that you have a ton of time to walk and listen and learn. And so the first workshop I held was called Feed the Wolf. And it was based on that parable that's, which wolf do you feed? That's the wolf that survives, the good wolf or the bad wolf. And so I wanted to understand what it was we should feed ourselves to have happiness, to have longevity, to have health span, not just lifespan. When I held that first workshop, I remember talking about and showing like, I've read about 200 books and I've got 6 certifications and I just had gotten deep in the actionable science about what you could do, not just what you could think about, what should you actually do? And then I was testing it all myself. And this was kind of when wearables were coming online. I was wearing every single wearable all at the same time to see which data I liked and why. I was doing all of the DNA tests to see which ones I thought were actually helpful and informative and actionable. I was doing multiple DEXA scans to get comfortable with which one would I say you should do twice a year. So I just had this freedom, and I felt really lucky that I had that freedom to test and learn a lot of stuff. It was a point in time where we were all on pause for a little bit, but it was also a point in time when I tapped out and said, I'm semi-retiring.
Yeah.
And so it freed up a lot of bandwidth to learn.
Yeah. So what wearables do you still use?
I still just use Aura. I landed on Aura because for me, another thing on my wrist didn't really work. I also think Aura is the toughest grader. So, I would get the harshest grade on sleep or HRV on Aura. So I was like, all right, that's good. And it has the longest battery life. So I don't want to deal with having to charge something all the time.
That's true. It's funny because I've been wearing the Aura for years, and just recently I took it off, and it's kind of also freeing to take a break.
Super. I do that too. Yeah.
And that's another one of those things where it's like, okay, it is a tool. It can be used for good, and it also can be overwhelming.
Yes.
And maybe there's like a time and a season and all of those things.
Well, my rule of thumb is I'm not going to wear it if I'm not going to do anything different. Right. So I'm checking for behavior change impact. So if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to experiment with saunas or cold plunges, or I'm going to do something in my sleep environment. So I'm mindfully trying to get a baseline, and then I'm going to go run the experiment. But I'm not going to wear it if I'm like, I'm eating dinner late. I know that's just going to wake up and be mad. So I'm not going to do that, So that I've learned about my wearable relationship.
Well, let's talk a little bit about these experiments. So what is your suggestion? And I guess I should say your focus is on women.
Yes.
All of your research.
It is. Yeah.
And is it fair to say middle-aged women, or is it all?
It's mostly middle-aged women. And so, kind of what drew me to this segment. I mean, obviously I am a middle-aged woman, but I have this like underlying belief that middle-aged women are the superpower to save the world. Like, I just really think they've got such great experience, and so many of them are starting to come back online with time to deploy that experience. But if you don't have the energy, or you don't have a roadmap on how to get that energy, it just kind of gets stuck and stalled. And so I'm really excited about helping women unlock that potential and kind of refire up, and that's midlife. That being said, I'm raising a daughter, right? So a lot of this stuff, I come across the research and I say, hey, you know what? Like, you're building your bone bank and your muscle bank between now and 30. I can't help but try to share that, to the younger generations too. But most of my client work and my speaking is focused with midlife women.
Okay. So midlife women. And I love that because even though I agree with you, like now we're talking about menopause, the scientific research on women is still lagging far
it's
behind.
Single digits. It's like 8% of all studies. So I think it's getting awareness, and there's some great thought leaders out there that are running at it hard, and they're changing that answer for us. And so it'll be available to us in 5 years.
But for now, it's not. So it's interesting. Like, I would listen to Tim Ferriss, and he would be like, cold plunge, and all of these different things. And then I would start to read some female authors, physicians who are like, well, not so much for women.
A little bit differently.
I guess the question is, for things that we hear out there, like cold plunge is kind of the new, I feel like. I mean, it's obviously not new. I was just in Japan too, and they've been doing cold plunge for a long time.
Turns out they did it back in the Greek and Roman days. Before we had heated water, everybody cold plunged. That's what we did. It's called a river.
Right, exactly. But how do you think about these things? Are you read about them or hear about them and you're like, ooh, I'm going to try it and do an experiment? Or how do you decide even what to try?
If it's even worth the time, right? So Jen and I always talk about this, and we joke because you can take a strategy consultant out of consulting, but you can't take the consulting out of the consultant. So I think of everything in a 2x2. It's like 2x2. Okay, what is it? And across the vertical axis, it'll be, what is the degree of difficulty for me to do this? Like, is it expensive? Is it hard to get to? Does it sound incredibly unpalatable? And then across the horizontal axis, it'll be how much research is behind this? Like, how data driven is this one? And then I'll just kind of plot it and be like, okay, so stuff in the top quadrant has a ton of research and it's not too hard for me to do. So, or does it feel too much friction for me to do? So I'm going to experiment and try it. Like, there's tons of stuff out there, like blood resampling. I'm not even going to go there. Like, I don't have that need,
Yeah. So like red light therapy.
All of the contrast therapy, heat and cold, is fun to experiment with. I've landed on a spot. So the next step, though, to answer your question, though, is I will look for female researchers. So there are a couple of them out there that are, Stacey Sims, Gabrielle Lyons, Mary Claire Harbour, I think, I'm forgetting her last name, but there are a lot of them that have made an influencer name for themselves, and David Stewart, who's a good friend of ours, Jen and myself. It does a great job profiling women longevity leaders. He started this, Aegis was the name of the brand, and Super Age focus maybe 10 or 11 years ago when he was 55. He was a fashion photographer and a mechanical engineer and was like, why am I not photographing anybody my age? So he went on a mission and he profiles people over 50 who are doing cool things. So he's got a great data set on his Aegis platform of longevity thought leaders who are female. So I'll kind of look through that and see what somebody's point of view is, and just take a look at the research and if there's enough of it that says it's not harmful to women. Like cold plunging is not harmful to women, but it's a little different. It's a little warmer and a little shorter, but it still has the dopamine kicker effect, and you'll feel it. And if you like it, go do it. But if you don't, if you hate getting the cold plunger, don't do that one. So that's how I'll kind of think through the experiments.
And then do you have journals, spreadsheets? Like how do you save all your data? All of it.
All of it. I do. Yeah, I do. I have spreadsheets, and then I track it in my journal now is my daytime planner. It's like a paper version. And I do also have a digital calendar that we all live on. But there are a couple of things I want to do and test every week and day. And so I'll just be marking that down in the week, and then I'll load it onto a spreadsheet. If I'm like, this is what I want to do a trend line on, and I want to see what it correlates to.
And then do you say at the end of the year, look back and say, this is what really made a difference in my life? Or
I do it more like weekly, quarterly, annually. I just kind of pull up and look at it. Like right now I'm doing a pretty aggressive, and I wanted to talk about it because to your point about things that people read, and it seems like you get disappointed in yourself if it doesn't work for you quickly, but I'm doing a really aggressive weightlifting program. And to me, I already lifted weights. Like that was not like a new idea for me. But to me, it feels aggressive. It's like an hour to an hour and 30 minutes weightlifting 5 days a week plus 7 days of cardio. I mean, it's hard. It's working. My bone density is improved. My body comp is improved, but it's hard. And I feel like nobody tells that story. They talk about 30 minutes of doing something 4 times a day. That's important to live well when you're 80, but it's not going to change the needle for you if you're really wanting to reshape something or you want to build muscle. Like it's a lot more work than people say on social media.
Right. And I think it's also one of the things I think is interesting. I spoke with a fertility doctor as part of the series, and one of the things that she said really stuck with me, which was sleep over exercise, every time. And I've definitely not always made that choice.
I haven't, but I started to in the last year, and I noticed the difference. I was at a 6 a.m. class, and I did love that, but I can't get 8 hours sleep and be at a 6 a.m. class with teenagers.
Right.
That's not happening.
Well, and also, I don't know if this happened with you, but through menopause, my sleep has been affected. So my sleep patterns, my sleep, like one night I might not sleep well, and I might have to make a different decision in the morning, you know, and sort of giving myself the grace to do that. Yes. So we have in our heads, I think, sometimes things that we think are correct for our health and well-being, but they're not always correct.
Yes.
Do you run across that a lot?
I do. And, I think one of the things that I've gotten really, I say almost reactive to is this idea that there is a formula and you need to follow the formula. And there's not one for each person. There's not one for each person in each phase of their life. And so like the idea of sleep over exercise, 90% of the time I would agree with that. But there's 10% of the time where you actually need the kicker of endorphins and dopamine and what you're going to get from that exercise that maybe you should trade the hour off. So I think knowing the information well enough to make your own intuitive trade-offs is available to us. Our intuition is truth known by one person, so you got to listen to it and sort of teach yourself to listen to it.
I completely agree with that. I also spoke as part of the series with a longevity doctor, and this whole idea of there's not one right thing for one person in one moment, but there are things that we know to be important.
Yes. And they're just straightforward, simple ones to do.
And then also this idea of how paternalistic our healthcare system has been traditionally. I think it's starting to change, but I feel like even I grew up, whatever the doctor says, you just you just listen and they're always correct.
Yeah.
And I think the fundamental shift as I'm exploring wellness is I am responsible for myself.
Yes.
And, I've always felt responsible for myself in things like financially or in other ways, but for my health, I think I was not always feeling that way because in part of the way that our healthcare system is built.
Yes, I think that's such a great commentary on how we've all just been subtly socialized, right? So we talk about this a lot in terms of something called the prototyping habit, which was something I learned kind of in my coaching world. But the idea is you are in charge of your physical and your mental health. And so you do need to prototype, to test things and decide what's right in any arena of your life. And how that shows up in the health and fitness or medical world is you're your own advocate. Like you need to go to the doctor with your questions already in mind and with your information research and pressure test. And you never go to just one doctor. Like, I mean, I had the gift of my grandmother was a nurse until she was in her 90s. And she just said, I don't trust doctors. You need to ask the questions. You need to show up for yourself. You cannot just take an answer. And then everybody has people in their lives who pushed back and found alternative solutions and they're thriving. So you're right. Your health is your responsibility and it's not something you can just leave on the back burner.
So yes, do the work, get help from somebody like you, a longevity doctor. There's so many people who can help us. But at the end of the day, it's okay to trust. We should trust our intuition as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's something that many women have to learn.
Well, I think it's almost like women have to relearn it. Like, I think there's a period in your life where you're super in touch with that and then it gets hammered out of you for different reasons. And so one of the things we talk about in our podcast was practicing your intuition muscle. Like just start to practice it again. Like it's just simple ways, like wake up and be like, what do I really want for breakfast today? Or do I really want to go to that class? Do I need to do that meeting? Just check in with yourself, hear your answer and act on it. Just reinforce that muscle of intuition and you get grounded in it again pretty quickly.
Okay. I love that so much. Well, you just mentioned your podcast. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
It's just like this. I get to talk with a friend. It's so fun. So it's Dr. Jen Wagner and I, and we just talk about midlife thriving issues for women. Our whole intent is to be able to bring quick, actionable solutions for midlife women to thrive right now and in what we call their high half. So their last 50 years, this first 50 years being potentially behind them. And it's on once a week and we kind of go back and forth between just talking the two of us and bringing in an expert.
Okay. And It's Time with Dr. Jen and Linsly.
Yes.
People can find it anywhere they can find podcasts.
They can. It's probably easiest to search up the name Linsly because it turns out there's not a lot of them.
And how do you determine the subject matter and who you're going to talk with?
Well, so we have kind of our 5 lifestyle pillars, as you were describing from the longevity doctor, the things that we know work are still the things that work, and they work across whatever problem you're trying to solve, right? So we start with movement and mindset. So mindset powers up everything. Movement is medicine, and those are kind of all sorts of varieties of movement and how to incorporate it in your life. And then we talk about nutrition and kind of fueling up to nourish yourself, not just fueling up to eat food, but really nourish yourself and seeing food as a nourishing source, which I think you do so well with the way you serve it up and plate it and make it beautiful. It should nourishing for your heart and soul. And then we talk about community and how important that is. And the last thing is something we kind of just titled Beyond, like believing in something bigger than yourself, whatever that is. It can be religion, spirituality, universe, whatever, but having a connection to something bigger than yourself is one of the key indicators of happiness and thrival in your back half.
How did you and Dr. Jen meet?
Jen and I had been working out together at the Bow Collective, one of my favorite happy places in town. And we didn't know what each other was doing. And it was actually Whit, the founder of the Bow, was like, hey, you two should go on a walk. Like, y'all like the same stuff. You talk about this all the time. And so we did. We just started walking and talking. And then she and I eventually did a workshop together, an online class together, and then do this podcast. And then I'm so excited for her because she has a startup called Prosper, which is something I work with her on too, that's helping women in a B2B context. So helping employers learn skills and toolkits to help women thrive and stay, because retaining women is a big opportunity. But she's just taken on the role of head of women's health and wellness at the Canyon Ranch. And so
amazing.
we're going to all have to go and visit her and do some workshops there.
That's amazing. Congratulations
Yes.
to her. And that's good for all of us.
It means great stuff is going to be coming online for us all to do. But we just have a ton of fun talking each week, no matter where we are. We're just going to get on the podcast and figure out a way to share something, a tidbit that's going to hit our screens. And there's no shortage of things that have hit our screens. Like this bone density thing has been coming up a lot for people. So we just did an episode on that.
Well, I'm going to listen to that. That's, as we age, obviously, it's one of the big concerns.
It is like, the data point that stuck with me is that you lose 20% of your bone density the first 6 years after menopause. Like, what?
Yeah.
How come we didn't learn that when we were 30?
I know.
That is a game changer And so these first 6 years after menopause, lift a lot of weights.
Yeah, you've got to be
jump
lifting.
on and off the steps, all that stuff. And so these kind of messages hopefully are getting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the mindset part of it. I love how in the beginning you were talking about, this, I don't know what you called it. It's like positive mindset and working it out like a muscle, but also as you're thinking about your body as fueling your mindset and your brain.
Yes.
Such a great way to think about it. So in this series, I also speak with a physician, Dr. Amit Anand, who started a company called Breathinance on the side. He's still practicing, but it's a form of meditation set to music and talks a lot about the amazing benefits to our health, and not for everyone and not for every condition, but that there are lots of different kinds of ways to do breath work, and breath work is fundamentally meditation. So can you talk about the mindset piece and mindfulness and what you've learned and how you try to teach that?
Absolutely. I first came across kind of meditation maybe 20 years ago. I was really interested in yoga. I had a yoga studio on the side and an e-commerce startup. It was before kids, so you could do that kind of thing. And I didn't really pay attention to the meditation part. I was like, that's super boring. Like, you're just sitting there. I'm doing the yoga movement part. But actually, the meditation part is the most powerfully researched and highest impact for your brain piece of the yoga world. And so when it came back into my kind of canvas, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I got interested in the whole science of meditation and mindset as a muscle. And the game changer for everybody in this space is this idea of neuroplasticity, which we all take it for granted. But I can remember 15, 20 years ago, we thought we'd kind of grown our brain and it was over. But now we all take it as a truth that we can rebuild our brain and rewire our brain. And so anything you can do, meditation, breath work, gratitude journaling, positive affirmations, manifestation, anything you can do to rewire your brain is on offer to do. And it works. And it's data-backed science, and the outcomes are worth going after. So when we talk about mindset, one of my first kind of conversations with people is, what have you already tried? What feels like total hokey to you? Because meditation is not something that everybody loves. I personally do, but I've got dear friends who are like that. I don't like that. So how do I get the benefits and do something different? So it's like an a la carte menu of things you can do, but they're basically doing the same thing. They're rewiring your neuro patterns so that you have a more uplifting and confident approach to the problems that are going to be facing you. And that's kind of what they're doing.
And is this what you do? So like, let's say you have a one-on-one client. Is it, you have these, whether you call it 5 buckets or whatever, is it trying to help them find what works for them within that bucket that they're going to stick to, that isn't too hard or take too much time, or that they actually enjoy to some degree? Is that what you're doing in those one-on-ones? Or is it like somebody comes in with a very specific issue like sleep or weight management or what have you?
It's really up to the client. So, I've had people come in and say, I don't know what to do next in my life. Like, what is the next? And that's a whole different process of, well, let's start to map that out. And, how do we answer that question? And how do we get iterative about that question? But mindset will play a role in that. Right? I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and getting good sleep might play a role in that. So it'll be based on what is it that the client is asking for help on. And then I've had other clients who come in and say, I need you as a business coach. I need you to help me power up my mindset in a business context. And because I have a business background and I have a similar track record in the kinds of things they're trying to solve, it's a 2-pronged answer. Like, how should I present this to the board of directors? And how do I get in the right headspace to do that presentation? So it kind of really depends on what people are asking for.
Okay.
And then in workshop context, the workshop will be about something specifically, like it'll be about menopause. And so that'll be the set of questions that we're trying to answer. But those 5 levers come in really no matter what the problem is, there's something there on offer in each of those 5 levers.
And how much are you going to do speaking engagements? And presumably that's like, there's a topic.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So not as much as I wish I was right now, because I got to say, there's no time for it right now. There's a lot of family travel that we're doing now.
Okay. But maybe in the future more.
In the future, it would be great. Maybe in 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
But mostly what I'd like to talk about is really these midlife issues. How do you get powered up? Really just how do you get back to your energy and reshaping what you want your canvas to look like and that horizon ahead and getting excited about it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about how for many women, they don't put themselves first. They don't They maybe never have, but certainly as we get older. So I was telling you about a friend and colleague I used to work with who amazing, brilliant woman, scientist, lived like a mile from Stanford. She and her husband went to bed one night and she like couldn't pull the covers up. And they both were like, well, let's see how you feel in the morning. And she had had a stroke. And if she had gotten to the hospital immediately, they could have given her medication that could have dramatically helped. She was very fortunate and she regained her function. She basically was paralyzed like half of her body by the next morning. And it obviously took a lot of time and effort. But I think what struck me the most was, I don't know if I know anybody smarter than this woman. And she made a decision to not put herself first, either because, oh, it's fine, it can't be anything serious. Like either it's denial or I'm not important enough or I need to take care of the rest of the family or all of the reasons. Yeah. And there's actually, I mean, a lot of data behind it. So 1 in 5 women from 55 to 75 will experience a stroke, and stroke kills more women annually than men. So that's just one example, but I feel like I see this over and over. Women, we are generally overachievers. We are managing many, many things. Yes. And yet somehow we're not, giving ourselves the oxygen first.
Yeah. So I think there are kind of 2 components to this. First, on the stroke, I mean, I want to underscore this, and Dr. Jen does a great job on a couple of episodes. We talk about heart disease. Heart disease is the number 1 killer of women, period, hands down, nothing bigger. And it presents totally differently in women than in men. So on this specific one, it's like, if you have low energy, if all of a sudden you just can't move your pinky, like anything, you should go have it checked, because it is the number 1 killer of women and it's not picked up. So put that as a PSA on the side. On the compartmentalizing, I mean, prioritizing yourself in compartments there, I think there are kind of 2 ways I've looked at this now, because, I mean, we all live this. One is sometimes I have to actively coach people to reframe taking care of themselves as the best way they can take care of their family and the people they love. And it's a hard recoaching, right? It's so easy to say the words, but to really get in your brain and be like, I am not taking care of my family if I'm not taking care of myself. It's like, that is the gift you give your children, is to take care of yourself. It's the gift you give your partner. It's the gift you give your friends. So that is one line of thinking that you just have to continue to reiterate. The other one is not as pretty, but it's also, I think, a harsh way to say it when I say it to people is, you're being lazy. Like, you're actually not showing up and doing something hard, which is to put yourself first. It is hard to do it. And so maybe what you're actually doing is being really lazy about this, and you got to have a wake-up call. It can be either angle, and I don't mean it to be like chastising, but at some point it is lazy and it is irresponsible to not take care of yourself, because no one else is going to take care of you. And if you are in a position in life where you are responsible for other people, you have to be in a good mindset and strength, physicality to do it,
Yeah. Is this something that you see a lot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the time. I think in midlife, people are getting better at it. Like, I feel like I'm hearing that more and more from our conversations, that women are like, I got to figure out what is important to me. But it's still like this little bit of a taboo, like, you're not supposed to say that out loud. You're not supposed to take care of yourself first. And you actually are. And really, most people, most partners and kids want you to.
Yeah.
They don't want you to be putting yourself on the back burner and in this martyrdom scenario. So it's a real shift in how you talk to yourself and how you give permission to yourself, and then how you give permission to each other, right? So we reinforce it in each other. We're like, good for you. That's so awesome that you're going to the spa. Way to go. And slowly try to rewire ourselves with one another too.
Yeah. I wonder if it's generational, or like it's cultural for sure. I wonder if that's shifting. Like, do you think your daughter has a different sense of that than you did?
I don't think so, unfortunately. I think it's a little bit, but I do still see the high school girls, not always saying that their needs are the most important. I do still see that. And I don't just mean my daughter, just when I'm hearing them all talk, So I think maybe there's a little bit of a shift, but it's not dramatic enough.
Yeah. So there's work to do.
There's opportunity there. You deserve to take care of yourself, and you are responsible for taking care of yourself. So putting yourself first, whether that means go meditate, get a cup of coffee, do some journaling before you start the day. Whatever it feels like for you, you own describing that to yourself and then protecting it and doing it.
Right.
And sometimes that's the way we have to frame it, because we just can't let go of that idea that it's selfish. It's like, okay, then let's reframe it, because it is the best way to take care of someone else is to be in good shape yourself.
Right. Can you think of a story, like a great success story from somebody that you've worked with? It could be on mindset. I mean, it could be on any of these elements we've talked about.
I think some of the most exciting stories are when we talk about what do you want to go do next? And I think a lot of midlife women are wrestling with this question. It could be because you're almost going to be an empty nester. It could be, that you are throttling back from full-time to part-time. One of my most energizing conversations about this was with a woman who was trying to just reposition her whole, what do I want to do with my day-to-day life? Like, what do I want it to look and feel like? And so it was a great visioning exercise around helping her describe that was super energizing. And then the tactics around that were, she was writing it down every day in her journal. Like, I was doing this, I am doing this now. But she actually wrote it all down, and she did all the practices, and she kind of manifested this whole change in like 3 months of just really owning, describing what she wanted. That takes a lot of time. It's not like you sit down in one journal session and go, I want to do that. But she owned it. And then she got specific enough to really describe, what am I wearing in this new job? Like, how far am I driving? And then kind of manifested this perfect-ish job. And so it was fun to see it kind of come to life.
I mean, it sounds amazing.
But it was a lot of work. Nobody really thinks about how hard that is to define what you want, because you have to try on hats and be like, that actually, I don't want that. Why did I say that?
And yet, if you don't do it, and I think the vast majority of people never do that, then you end up sort of gambling with your life.
Or just reacting to it. And another kind of interesting problem that I've seen come up is when people are talking about this, they're like, I feel sort of selfish to even have this question, right? Like, there are people dying in the Ukraine, starving in Gaza. This feels like a really sort of self-indulgent question. I should just keep marching along, right? And it's like, actually, no, you need to bring the best version of yourself to the world. That's what you're going to give this world. It's going to ripple somehow. You don't know how, but you have to have faith that figuring out the right thing for you is figuring out the best thing that you can bring to the world.
I agree with that. And I also think I talk a lot about how we have seasons in life. Like, there was a season in my life where my biggest priority was my paycheck.
Yes, that's important.
To be able to bring up my family. And now I feel like, okay, and maybe for many people it's in the second half of life where it's like, okay, I had that focus, and now I really want to feed my soul and focus on being the healthiest person I can for myself and my loved ones. So we have sort of seasons, and I do think it's a privilege to have the time and space to think about, what do I want to do with my time? But there's also a responsibility that comes with that privilege, which is to do something that makes a difference.
Very much so.
And so it's not, I'm glad that you can help people out of thinking like it's a selfish thing to do. It's a privileged thing to do. And out of it can come the best things. I
can't agree with you more. I think that the way you frame that as it's a responsibility to think about it is absolutely right? Like, you've got so much to offer. You've got experience. You've got now maybe more time, more financial resources. It's your responsibility to deploy it. So get out there and deploy it in a way that rejuvenates you to keep doing more of it.
Let's talk a little bit more about menopause. Do you think that there are, and this may be too simplistic, but a few smaller lifestyle changes that can help women as they're entering and going through menopause?
I do. I think the first thing is just, and you described this so well, is just to have some grace and compassion with yourself and just realize, I did not know until I started studying this whole menopause thing that it could be a 15-year journey. Like perimenopause, menopause is like one time on the calendar. And then when you're in menopause, it's not like you go to that 1 year mark when you haven't had your period and all of a sudden it's static. Your hormones are still doing a bunch of other stuff, and you're trying to maybe use hormone therapy, or, you're still vibrating on the other side of menopause. So that first just sort of take a breath and realize that this is a journey. It's not going to be predictable. And there's really nothing that's your fault about it. It's just going to happen. And so that gives you some space to deal with it. And then it is the same lifestyle levers that we see help depression or help sleep or help anxiety. It's movement. It's trying to get your sleep, and sleep is really hard. I found out I had sleep apnea. I wear a mask, and that has been a big game changer for me on how I actually stay asleep. And so I think those two things, sleep and movement, are the same kind of levers that you'll use whenever you're trying to address something holistically. Being able to know what your symptoms exactly are, and then working with a doctor who's open to hearing it. So I had to work with a couple of different doctors before I found somebody who was really open to me advocating and trying different things for my set of symptoms.
And I think that's actually a really good note too, because while we're talking about menopause much more, and while many doctors will say that they're sort of more in tune with it, I've heard from a lot of women the experience is not that.
Yes, I can holistically add into that anecdotal evidence. I went to probably 3 different doctors and a hormone specialist before I landed with my current doctor, who I adore. She's our concierge doctor, Dr. Nepper. She's great. But it took a while for me to find her and try other things and be hitting roadblocks before I was like, I got to work with somebody else. But, it's to your observation about the medical system overall.
You're right. Exactly. That sounds like great starting advice.
And, there's some cultures, I think Japan is one, that celebrate menopause. It's like this great wisdom moment, and you're free of the childbearing days, and that culture celebrates it. So, I love us kind of finding a way to start celebrating that too.
Let's do it. Let's do it. This is a very difficult question.
Okay.
How do you define wellness?
I think of wellness as thriving. And so that is the word that always comes to me when I think about wellness is, are you thriving? And it doesn't always mean you're happy. It doesn't always mean you're joyful or you're stress-free, but it does mean that you're energized and engaged and moving forward in life. And so that's what I think of with wellness is it's all that 360 perspective. So are you thriving with your mental health? Are you thriving with your physical health? Are you thriving in community? Are you thriving in partnerships? And are you thriving on an area of work that you're finding that ikigai magic intersection, of what you do, what the world wants you to do, what you get paid to do, and what the world needs? That's the kind of work that helps you feel like you have meaning and purpose. That's part of thriving.
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
I think about, honestly, probably until I started going through menopause, I didn't really think about wellness so much. Like, I thought about health.
Yeah.
I thought about meaning, but I didn't have this all encapsulating sensibility of life. And I wonder how many younger people really are thinking about this holistic sense of wellness, or if you maybe need a little bit of life experience and a little bit of sorrow and a little bit of, a dash of this and a dash of that to appreciate.
I think that's a great perspective on it. And I think you probably do. I look with our kids, and they're still, even though we try to have different conversations with them than what we think we heard from our parents' generation, they're still on this linear trajectory point of view. It's this step and this step and this step. And that doesn't really allow a lot of space for wellness. I am really heartened by how many kids and high school students are really connected to the idea of therapy and mental health and having a conversation when you're feeling not great. I don't think we had that much of an open conversation about that when we were in high school. So that is probably putting them on a path to wellness more quickly, or a more robust one. in their trajectories.
I also think, and I have not looked into the science on this, but this whole sense of consciousness. And like when I was younger, certainly in high school, and I consider myself a pretty empathetic person, but when I was in high school, I didn't have this great sense of the larger world totally and my place in it. And I think part of that is you're very egocentric when you're a teenager, which is biologically appropriate.
Yeah.
But as we get older, I think we can have this broader sense of like our place in the universe and that we are not necessarily the center of it.
Yes. Well, but we also, it's a gift obviously to have lived long enough to have the perspective that you realize we all are just walking this life path, right? The question of purpose and meaning, it doesn't really hit you in your 20s because the purpose and meaning is like, I need to pay my bill.
Right.
That is about all I can focus on. I would be happy if the ATM made the noise that cash was coming out. Like, it's like, yay. And so now that you've got this life roadmap that you've looked at and you go, and there's this much ahead, like, and everybody from, Marcus Aurelius to Jesus to whoever you believe in has already walked this path. Like, what's the purpose of it? That doesn't come up when you're 18, unless you're a philosophy major, maybe.
Right. I don't know. And even then, I'm not sure at 18 you can really grapple with those things. I mean, I'm sure there are a few people who can. Yeah. But one of the other things that we talked about with Autumn Bear and the Longevity Doctor is community. And I know you also care a lot about community. Talk a little bit about community and wellness and how you can kind of like wrap these things together.
Yes. And so, luckily that longitudinal study, the Harvard study that came out, has gotten a lot of awareness around how important community is for lifespan and health span. And then there's also a parallel study that was done with nuns. I don't know if you've come across that one. Love it because the Harvard one is mostly male-based, except for their family around them, right? But it's male-based. It was Harvard kids, and then it was expanded to different socioeconomic groups in Boston. But it was pretty much architected around men. And then the nun study was for the same like 90 or 100-year period. And they basically had nuns track their journals, how they were feeling. And it was a similar outcome, which was community is tied to happiness. So the nuns that were in community or felt really connected to that community were driving a happier outcome and living longer and living healthier. So it's, a couple of different contexts for the study, but I think community can be something that's very much physical community network. And I think we all learned in COVID that is necessary, right? The physical community is necessary. But I think it also has a lot to do with what you curate in terms of what you put in your head, who you stay in touch with, who are the podcasts you listen to. That's part of your community as well. Right. So it is active, just like thinking about your health and your wellness overall, it's active participation in curating a community that can uplift and that you can also uplift. So community service is a component to that. Your children's networks are components to that. But it is one where it's worth kind of revisiting it as you're going every year and looking at it and saying, is this the community that I still want to be re-engaging and reinforcing, or do I want to mix it up a little bit? Is there a new element I want to be able to add in, or a new element I want to be able to amplify with someone else?
Well, and I think part of that is giving yourself space to let go of things that were community. So I think I've gotten better as I'm getting older in saying like, these people that I used to spend time with are not filling me up, and I need to be able to let that go.
Yeah,
like it's okay to let that go.
Yeah. I mean, that's a season of life too. I always quote my father-in-law, Chris's dad, on this because I think it's the most simple way to say it. But he told the kids in high school, he's like, you need to pick your drinking partners wisely. It's like, just be careful who you're surrounding yourself with,
Yeah,
So.
I mean, absolutely. And that can change.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that can change. So if you could leave people with one wellness philosophy or practice to take away from this conversation, what would you want them to take away?
Well, you know what? I was thinking about this, and I mean, I think your branding is it. Like, nourishing your soul is the best wellness practice. So it's the self-care, it's being connected to your inner self and nourishing that so that it can power up your mindset. It can power up your longevity health plan. It can power up your community and your spirituality. So being generous with time with yourself to be able to reflect and nourish yourself would be the number one wellness tip I would wish for people.
And I think that the intuition piece. So then spending that time and then listening to yourself. And then, if you need help, you're here. There are a lot of people
Yes.
in this series people can reach out to. Like there are a lot of people that help you along this journey, which I also think is really nice.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
we can't do it alone.
You don't want to do it alone. And most people, I mean, if somebody wants to offer their help, it's a gift they want to give. So most people love the ask and are ready to show up with what you need.
I have 5 questions I like to ask every guest at the end. But before we get there, is there anything I haven't asked you that you wanted to share or talk about?
No, I would want to underscore people's fundamental belief that they have the power to put their mindset to work on their behalf. I think those words can sound light and the work behind it can feel hard, but it is the fundamental lever to change anything in your life trajectory. And so I just would underscore that.
Yeah, it's funny. As you know, I have 2 teenage boys, and forever, I mean, I've said 2 things to them. 1, you can't love somebody else until you love yourself.
Yes.
Love yourself first. And 2, your brain is incredibly powerful. You wake up and you think you're going to have a bad day. Guess what? You're going to have a bad day. And on the other side of it, if you wake up and you think you're going to have a good day,
you change your odds.
You change it.
Yeah.
And our brains are just incredibly powerful.
They are. And I think, obviously we hear about how our brains are getting hijacked and all the impacts of social media and just digital noise. And so taking ownership to have that mindset gym approach is even more important. Because it's, people are not taking care of our brains for us. Everything is fighting against us on that right now.
Right. Yeah. As we explore in my brand, Amatand,
I love your brand.
thank you. Objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can take us to the past. And I think for most people, it tends to be to the past. They can enable us to be in the present and sometimes even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not? And a lot of the things people share are not things they still have. And tell us why you chose that.
Well, I chose this object because it's a recent part of my life, but it is a little music box. And if you crank it, it plays You Are My Sunshine. And my daughter gave it to me maybe 10 years ago because I used to sing that song to her all the time. And people had sung the song to me. So I love that object, that it's like a generational memory of.
Oh my God.
Caretaking.
I'm going to cry. My mom used to sing me that song.
Yes, right? So
I haven't heard that.
I know.
Song reference in a long time.
Yeah, it goes there. You're like, oh, yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that. Can you share a favorite tradition? It could be something you did when you were a kid, something you do with your kids, anything at all.
Yes. I love this tradition. And my kids are going to be like, Mom, you always make us do this. But I love it. As we do this thing and we do it around Thanksgiving. And it's like a gratitude tree. And Chris and I probably write on it like 5 to 1, relative to kids. But it's their little leaves that you stick in this little gratitude tree. I save them every year and then go back and I look at them. There's always a funny story in there. Like, I'm really happy that I got this race car, or, Chris and I writing a lot of things, and like, oh, we're really happy that the dishes got done. What was it? But I love that little tradition. It helps.
And where did that come from?
I think it was just one of those things I saw when we had kids. It was like, the Thanksgiving tradition is obviously something we're all really familiar with, but it was this little like wooden tree, and I saw it and was like, that's cute. Everybody can write a little thing on a green leaf and stick it in there. So
I love that. That's wonderful. Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
I love this question. I do enjoy entertaining in our home. I am not the cook in our home. I will tell you that Chris is an amazing chef. And so it's much easier, I think, for me to entertain because I'm not the cook. But I don't get to do it enough. And I think that's just a reflection on calendaring and like a little bit of lost spontaneity. Like we used to entertain and more spontaneously be throwing parties. And, in the last kind of 4 or 5 years, I think our calendar collision has just made it tough to put something on and get it done. But I'd love it when we do.
Well, I also think going back to like seasons in our life, I feel like we have also not been as good the last couple of years. I think having teenagers is hard.
It's hard.
So I think when they're like off to school, I suspect
that's when we're going to have our dinner parties.
We'll be back to our dinner parties. I asked this question. I mean, it obviously ties to my brand, Amatand, and the focus on setting the table for gatherings and spending time together. And I think it's just about spending the time. Somebody will remember if the food is excellent or terrible, but it's not so much about the food.
Yes.
It's really about the company. And component to wellness. And and I think a lot of times people get so stuck on like, my house has to be perfect or the meal has to be perfect. Really trying to disabuse people of that.
Yeah, I love that message. I think we do a better job of it in things like book club, because we'll come together as women and we come together a little more relaxed, I think, than if we're doing the mixed couple dinner party. And so I think that's a great thing to keep in the back of our minds, that it is about the company. And the people who are wonderful entertainers, you don't really notice the food one way or another. You just notice how fun it was to be at their house. So.
And how welcome they made you feel and all of those things.
Yes.
It's funny, I just actually did a mini series on how to create a great book club because I've actually never been able to create a great book club. But food is funny, like, it is a thought process. So I interviewed one man, it's all men in his book club, and they have book club over dinner. And then I interviewed his wife, and they never have book club over dinner because they don't want to have the responsibility of making dinner.
Yes.
So it's like tea and a slice of cake or whatever it is. But it's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. I've never really met a man with the book club.
35-year book club.
Wow.
They have a waiting list for their book club. It's amazing. You have to listen to that.
That is cool. Okay.
It's totally amazing.
I will.
Do you have one or two top resources? Books, podcasts, of course, remind us your podcast. And it doesn't have to be about wellness. Sometimes people just share their favorite books. I love to read and I love to get recommendations from guests. Yeah. Just throw out a couple.
Okay. Well, I love all kinds of podcasts. So, that's kind of a hard one for me to just pick one because
Well, pick yours. Tell us about yours again.
Yes. It's Time with Dr. Jen and Linsly. It's a weekly podcast. And I don't think there's an episode that's more than 45 minutes. We try to keep them pretty short because they're coming out every week. And so I would recommend that one for sure. I love that one. And then, for a book recommendation, what popped to my mind, actually, our dear friend Emily recommended this one to me. It's The Creative Life. And I love the story about how to be a creative thinker, even if you're not quote unquote creative. And so I would recommend that one. And then I love the book Sean Anker wrote about happiness. And it kind of lays out the scientific reason why it's in our best interest to try to be happy. Like, what are the resources you need to be aware of, and what's the research? And so if you're talking with somebody that's struggling with mindset, it gives you sound bites for why to say it's worth your time to care about happiness, and it can be built like a bicep.
Okay, wonderful. Last question, and this one is sort of like your entire life, so I don't know what you're going to choose, but tell us at least one thing that you do for yourself. I know you have a practice of focus, a daily routine. Maybe just share a highlight or two.
I think my favorite thing, and this has probably been my favorite thing for about the last 10 years, is getting up about 45 minutes before anybody else does in my house. I really like the quiet time to get my cup of coffee, meditate. I do a little gratitude journaling. I look at what's on for the day, and I just come into the day with an exhale. Because, when you're first doing those early years of family life, I felt like I always just started like the jump out of bed and it raced in the day, and I didn't really exhale. And so I love the idea of a little quiet time in the morning, which, means it's hard to do a 6 a.m. workout and get the quiet time in. I'm choosing the quiet time, and I'll work out later,
How long have you been doing that quiet time?
About 10 years.
Wow. What made you start?
It was not a great thing that made me start. Is I was working a lot with people in India and Russia because they were our developers. And so they would work these really odd hours. And so I would get up to be awake and have a cup of coffee before I was talking with our development team over in India or in Russia. And I just realized, I had this extra energy time doing that, even though I went into then working with them on a call. It just was nice to have a little bit of quiet time. And so when we transitioned here, I just started doing it in our home as well. And I love it so much. If I miss that, if for some reason I've slept through my alarm or I don't wake up at the time with 45 minutes or so, I feel cheated through the day.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Well, Linsly, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so fun.
Thank you for having me. This is such a delight.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our show helps us to continue to make quality episodes. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatond, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatond at ametond.com. atendre.com, or on Instagram at Amatonde. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatonde website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatonde and Amatonde's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatonde.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along.